Well, we have to take a moment of break from the fun of imagining Sheila Jackson Lee as Department of Homeland Security Secretary, which would be funny if it weren't so real, the Congressional Black Caucus having nominated her or suggesting to the president that he do. We need to take a moment to talk to Senator Ted Cruz from the great state of Texas about his efforts to defund Obamacare in Washington, D.C. Senator, glad to have you on, sir.
Michael, it's always great to be with you.
Well, since the day Obamacare passed, we hoped that the courts would rule this unconstitutional. And when it did not happen because John Roberts turned on us, we have looked to the legislature, of which you are now a part, to defund this thing and end it. And I know you are leading the charge. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, we have got right now, I think, our best and possibly our last opportunity to defund Obamacare and to do so permanently. And that is on September 30th, 63 days from today, the continuing resolution that funds the federal government expires. Now, I have publicly committed, along with a number of other senators, that under no circumstances will I vote for a continuing resolution that funds even 1 penny of Obamacare. If we can get 41 senators, Republicans, to stand together in the Senate, or if we can get 218 Republicans in the House to stand together, we can actually succeed in defunding Obamacare, not cast another symbolic vote, but actually use the constitutional power of the purse to stop this failed train wreck of legislation that is Obamacare.
Walk me through, Senator Ted Cruz, why you need 41. That's filibuster proof?
That's exactly right. 41 is enough to sustain a filibuster, and 218 is a majority in the House, so that's enough to pass something in the House. And the way this would play out is the House should pass a continuing resolution that funds the entirety of the federal government, every part of it, except for Obamacare, and that explicitly prohibits funding Obamacare. What will happen next, we've seen this play before, is Harry Reid and President Obama will scream and yell that the mean and nasty Republicans are threatening to shut down the government. And at that point, Republicans have to stand up, and we got to win the argument. We got to win the fight and say, no, we have voted to fund every bit of the federal government. Why is Barack Obama threatening to shut down the federal government in order to force Obamacare down our throats, particularly when he just granted large corporations a waiver from Obamacare? Why would he be willing to shut down the federal government to force Obamacare on hardworking American families when big corporations are getting a waiver?
If we're able to accomplish that, let's start in the Senate. And I know you and Senator Jeff Sessions from Alabama have been working on this. If, in fact, with 41 senators, we can accomplish that, you would not need an act from the House at that point?
You would need either body to stop a continuing resolution that funds Obamacare.
It is my understanding that last week Senator John Cornyn, and I'm sorry to put you in a bad position, but we care about these things, that Senator Cornyn, also from Texas, removed his name from the defund Obamacare commitment. Is that true?
Well, that's right, and what that concerns is a letter that Senator Mike Lee and I circulated, and initially Senator Cornyn signed it, and then he made the decision to pull his name off the letter. And this was on this issue of whether Republicans should stand up and refuse to fund one more penny of Obamacare.
You've created a website, as I understand it, to oppose this?
There is a national website that is called don'tfundit.com, don'tfundit.com. And right now, if the vote were to happen today, unfortunately, Michael, we don't have the votes. We don't have the votes in the Senate. We don't have the votes in the House because a lot of Republicans are scared. They're scared of having this fight over the shutdown, of getting blamed on a shutdown. The only way this will happen is if the American people rise up, if thousands upon thousands or millions of Americans sign the petition at don'tfundit.com and get on the phone and call their representatives, call their senators and say, enough talk, enough saying you oppose Obamacare. Actually have the courage of your convictions and stand up and say no more. If we defund it now, this is our best opportunity to do so.
Which means if we can't get 218 out of 435 congressmen in the House to oppose this, when we have a vast majority of Republicans, that means we're losing a pretty goodly percentage of Republicans who are willing to fund Obamacare rather than defund it. to state the obvious.
You're exactly right, and I'll tell you one of the things that has surprised me the most in the 7 months I've been up here is how many Republican politicians desperately want symbolic show votes. You know, the House has voted to repeal Obamacare, 39, 40, 41 times. Every one of those was an empty fig leaf because it had no chance of passing into law, but it let all the Republicans come home and tell their constituents, who many of them I think were gullible, say, see, I'm really opposed to Obamacare. The continuing resolution, this fight, the next 63 days, is where the rubber meets the road, because if we actually stand up here, we can succeed in doing it. Now, it will be a hard fight. The media will be against us. The Democrats will be against us. But if we're not willing to fight on this, Michael, what are we willing to fight on? What are we doing up here if we're not willing to stand up and prevent Obamacare from becoming a permanent fixture in the American economy?
Senator Ted Cruz, what you are describing and willing to call out your own party for is perhaps as cynical as anything that happens in public life today. And I want to make sure that we connect the dots on this. You're telling me that some large number of times, around 40 times, a majority of the United States Congress, because they're Republicans, have voted against Obamacare, end Obamacare. But when given the opportunity 63 days from now, you're telling me that a number of those who have voted against it and have said, I went up there and voted against it, when given the opportunity to stop it, will not make that vote and will turn back and say, but I voted against it over there. I was against it before I was for it.
Right. Look, that is exactly right. But there is a way we can change it. You know, the whole paradigm has shifted in Washington, which is when the grassroots rise up, it forces elected officials to listen to us. And listen, I think the American people should hold every elected politician accountable, including me. I mean, that's every one of us works for we the people. And the way to change the game, I cannot win this fight. Mike Lee can't win this fight. Marco Rubio can't win this fight. No politician in Washington can win this fight. The only one who can win this fight is the American people. And it's why Don'tFundIt.com is so important, because we need to get thousands, if not millions, of Americans standing up in the next 63 days to force these elected officials to actually stand for what they claim to stand for.
Senator Ted Cruz is our guest, suggesting that 63 days from now, he and Mike Lee and others are leading a charge to defund Obamacare procedurally through a continuing resolution. And that continuing resolution, to be clear, what we're saying here, I'm trying to think through the logistics. What we're saying here is you would continue to fund the government on an ongoing basis. You would provide funding for everything but Obamacare. Right. And what scares the Republicans is what happened, the story that was told back in the mid-'90s when Gingrich did that to oppose Bill Clinton. And the theory went, yeah, Clinton won that, and that's why Gingrich was kicked out and Clinton was reelected.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And listen, one of the consequences of this fight is if we get Republicans to stand up, we could well see a temporary partial government shutdown. That if Republicans in the House pass a continuing resolution funding the government except for Obamacare, Harry Reid and Barack Obama might say, absolutely not, we're willing to shut the government down. But, you know, we've seen this before in 1995, as you just mentioned.
Senator, I want to talk about 95. Can you hold with us for just a moment?
Sure.
The website is don'tfundit.com. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz is our guest. The website is don'tfundit.com. Don't put a contraction in there. It will redirect you to don'tfundobamacare.com. Several of you have said you had problems. I got through just fine. So don'tfundit.com. Senator, I'm looking at the website, and you've called out your fellow senators, some of whom have said they'll defund it, and now they won't sign on. How frustrating is it that in order to win this battle, you really only have to get the people on your side of the aisle who are out there telling us on talk radio and in mailings and in appearances, we got to oppose Obamacare. And when push comes to shove, as you say on the site, if you're going to say you're a conservative, then prove it.
Right. Well, look, I mean, it is one of the reasons why so many Americans are frustrated with career politicians in both parties. We've discovered both Republicans and Democrats, come home to their states, they talk a good game, and yet when they go to Washington, they just try to hold on to power and get reelected. And they think that an awful lot of the voters are rubes. I think the American people are a lot more sophisticated than these politicians give us credit for. But I think the only way we're going to get them to stand up and do the right thing is if we make it riskier to do the wrong thing than it is to do the right thing, if we put real accountability from the American people.
And we're going to see an effort over the next 63 days by the Democrat Party, Democrat elected officials, and the national media to suggest that those of you pushing this effort are hurting the Republican Party and that John McCain is the real Republican and Lindsey Graham, and that what y'all are trying to do is force a government shutdown. And we're going to hear Republican insiders say, we'll lose if we do that. The public will be angry with us. What makes you so sure that the public will understand when Barack Obama shuts down the government why they didn't get their Social Security check?
Well, they may not, but it's actually worth underscoring. Let's go back to what a partial government shutdown would mean. Because when it happened in 1995, we saw it happen twice when Republicans stood up to Bill Clinton. The world didn't end. Planes didn't fall out of the sky. Social Security checks still came. The military still got paid. The national debt was serviced. What happened was non-essential government functions were temporarily delayed. So it's basically what happens every weekend when you see non-essential government functions shut down. And the consequence of House Republicans for a limited period of time in 95 being willing to stand up to Clinton is that we saw year after year of balanced budgets come out of Congress and some of the most fiscally responsible policies Congress has ever passed, all because Republicans, for one brief moment in history, discovered their backbone. We got to do it again. We got to actually stand up, and the point you just made a minute ago about that we can do it with just Republicans. We don't need a single Democratic vote to win this fight. We just need 41 Republicans in the Senate or 218 in the House. We've got them if the Republicans will simply vote the way they talk when they're back home.
Senator, I know you need to go. I want to ask you one quick question because there's something out there that I can't grasp. Are these Republicans refusing to come along with you and do what all of us want them to do, because they genuinely fear a government shutdown and the negative press? Or is there some other interest out there that we're not seeing that they're capitulating to?
Well, there are a lot of folks in Washington that like to be perceived as wise graybeards in the Washington cocktail circuit. They move up here, they live here, they're surrounded by the press and the lobbyists, and that's whose approval they're seeking. And a shutdown, there are a lot of Republicans that are scared to do anything that is perceived as rocking the boat. They think the way you win elections is you close your mouth and you don't do anything and just magically people vote for you. I think that's exactly backwards. So some of them are arguing we're going to screw up 2014 doing this. I think it's backwards. The way you win elections is you stand for principle and you give people a reason to show up and vote, because the reason Congress has approval ratings of 10, 12, 14% is the American people are fed up with career politicians, Republicans and Democrats, who don't stand for principle, who don't stand for liberty or the Constitution. And we can turn that around if we can actually force these elected officials to do what they say when they go back home.
Senator, I've helped other people get elected, and I think I will criticize you tomorrow in public or in private when I disagree with you. But I have never in my life been prouder of supporting a politician based on your first 7 months than of you. Thank you.
Well, and thank you, Michael. And I will say this, I wouldn't be here if it was not for you. You are ferocious and fearless and a voice for liberty. You are my friend, and I'm grateful.
Well, I put my name on the line for you, and daily people thank me for having done so because you make us all incredibly proud. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Michael. Bye-bye.